Welcome to Trans Truth, the podcast dedicated to dispelling myths, fear, and ignorance about transgender people. From time to time, we'll also be sharing items of interest to the transgender community, from political and news events to health, fashion, and beauty. Also, please be sure to follow and share the Trans Truth podcast on Facebook. And now, here is some news and commentary that should be of interest to our listeners. As we are recording this on Monday, July 14th, 2025, federal terror troops are still occupying Los Angeles and other American cities, while Trump's secret police continue to abduct innocent civilians and detain them with outright defiance of the rule of law. Most recently, in Los Angeles, heavily armed terror troops invaded famous MacArthur Park, frightening children and storming through the soccer fields on horseback, and ordering the volunteers at a pop-up health clinic to leave. Now, as many of you know, tragedy has recently unfolded in the Texas Hill Country, just a few hours from where we are here in the Houston area. On Friday, July 4th, a freak weather event in the middle of the night caused a massive flash flood on the Guadalupe River near Kerrville. As of 2 p.m. on July 9th, the death toll was at 119, with 173 still listed as missing. Predictably, Republican politicians are on defense, especially since their party is behind the budget cuts that have decimated NOAA, the National Weather Service, and FEMA. Now, later that weekend, Travis Herzog, the chief meteorologist at Houston's ABC 13, made a series of social media posts pointing out that even though they were short-staffed, local forecasters for the National Weather Service were able to predict the heavy rain to the most accurate extent possible. At the same time, Herzog notes that the means used to notify people in the impacted areas are lacking. Local officials recently rejected the construction of an alert system that could have saved lives that night. Other local officials actually approved the expansion of Camp Mystic in the flood zone. That expansion was completed last year. Now, I'm retired, of course, but as a career first responder, I know that prevention is a far more effective strategy for saving lives or preventing injury and property loss. So I am troubled by the miserly thinking that trivialized a risk that has been realized in that part of the state multiple times in recent decades. 27 campers and counselors at Camp Mystic, a Christian church camp for girls, are dead because the only warnings they might have received went out via text message, and mobile phones were not allowed at Camp Mystic. The other day, Texas Governor Greg Abbott said that those who are asking questions about the failure to properly prepare or prevent this tragedy were losers.
Who's to blame? Know this. That's the word choice of losers. Let me explain one thing about Texas. Texas, every square inch of our state, cares about football. You could be in Hunt, Texas, Huntsville, Texas, Houston, Texas, any size community, they care about football. And know this, every football team makes mistakes. The losing teams are the ones that try to point out who's to blame.
Well, I do know this, Mr. Governor. When the Cowboys or the Oilers lost a game, yeah, I'm that old. Get off my lawn. When that happened, you can bet your bottom dollar that Coach Landry or Coach Phillips went into the locker room and pointed out who is to blame, long, hard, and loud. I'm pretty sure that calling Tom Landry and Bum Phillips losers would be fighting words for Texas football fans. Yes, losers try to deflect blame, just like Greg Abbott and Texas Congressman Roger Williams have been doing long, hard, and loud. Texas Congressman Roger Williams has, predictably, been among those politicians deflecting all responsibility. According to Williams, the flood was, and stop me if you've heard this one, an act of God.
These left-wing liberals that want to make this political and blame this storm on Donald Trump for crying out loud. This is an act of God like we've never seen before.
Yeah, like we've never seen before. Jeri Ann and I have both been through weather events, acts of God, if you will, that make the events in Kerr County look like nothing more than a summer squall. Between us, we figured we've weathered close to a dozen hurricanes in our lifetime. But there's one more thing that puzzles me, and that's the predictable invocation of God's will by Texas politicians. I've heard more than one official express thanks that God chose to spare so many survivors. Why are they not asking why God chose to drown all those little girls at Camp Mystic? By the way, we're going to ask that very question of the Reverend Dr. Jeri Ann Young in an upcoming episode. And to wrap up this story, you and many of our listeners know that I had a 23-year career as a firefighter and paramedic. For several years, I served as a peer counselor on a critical incident stress debriefing team. The team's mission was to help minimize the impact events like this one on first responders. I can tell you that there will almost certainly be PTSD casualties among the first responders who are right now working the aftermath of this horrific event. I've seen things like this end careers, end marriages, and in the case of one of my fellow paramedics, also a fellow soldier and an RN, PTSD took her life. So my heart goes out to every last one of those first responders and volunteers who are working the aftermath of that event. In our last episode, we reported on Trump ordering the removal of the 988 suicide hotline for LGBTQ youth. Today, we are happy to report that at least a few Republicans apparently do not want those kids to die by their own hand. The Advocate reports that a bipartisan group of U.S. House lawmakers is urging Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to block the Trump administration's plan to eliminate that service. In a letter to the HHS Secretary, signed by Representatives Raja Krishnamurti, a Democrat from Illinois, New York Republican Michael Lawler, and Massachusetts Democrat Seth Moulton and Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican from Pennsylvania, the congressmen call on the secretary to block the planned elimination of the service. This is not some kind of hotline set by a liberal Democratic administration, Krishnamurti said in an interview with The Advocate. Thursday morning, quote, "It was actually signed into law by President Trump and various Republicans in the Senate, and the House supported it," unquote. Since going fully live in 2023, the service has received an average of 2,900 contacts per day, according to Krishnamurti. And Trump wants to take away life-saving resources for those 2,900 young people who need help every day. Is this not evidence that this is yet one more population that the Republicans think they can on in order to score points with their fearful and ignorant base? In an opinion piece in the National Catholic Reporter, author Maxwell Kuzma urges his readers to stop legitimizing pseudoscience in order to marginalize trans people. Kuzma, a trans man, explains that he, quote, knows what it means to live at the intersection of faith, identity, and marginalization. And I'm telling you, there is nothing neutral about legitimizing pseudoscience, stoking fear over trans existence, and invoking reasonable concern while transgender youth are under legislative siege, unquote. Yeah, we've been beating that drum since the Republicans started targeting the trans community with their latest fear-mongering campaign over 3 years ago. But I like how Kuzma puts it. Quote, trans medicine is not up for debate in peer-reviewed journals or at the bedside of compassionate doctors. But our healthcare is repeatedly dragged into bad faith political attacks disguised as legal nuance, unquote. And that's it, in a nutshell. The Republicans utterly ignore the overwhelming professional consensus of medical and psychological experts who study and treat gender dysphoria and gender identity. Now, this next story is very cool, if for no other reason than the fact that I learned something new. Well, not really new, but new to me. The South Dakota Searchlight reports that the Transformation Project, a nonprofit transgender rights organization, and the database known as Dorothy's List have announced their merger. Now, Dorothy's List is a database of LGBTQ-friendly businesses, much like the nationwide The Pink Pages. But here's the cool part. The name, Dorothy's List, is a nod to the question, are you a friend of Dorothy's? Which was, I guess, in common use in decades past, when being LGBTQ could get you arrested and jailed. Now, I knew that Dorothy Gale, the heroine from The Wizard of Oz, of course, was a gay icon, as was the actress who played her, Judy Garland. But I'd never heard that clever question before.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Anyway, if, like me, your egg cracked well after Lawrence v. Texas rendered laws criminalizing homosexual behavior to be unconstitutional, you need not get off my lawn today, children. But while you're there, you might want to read up on the whole Friend of Dorothy thing. There's a link, as always, in the episode notes. Now, we're all just babes in the woods who never had to use cool code words to interact with other LGBTQ people. Okay, we've all heard or read the whining from the right-wing snowflakes. Why can't there be a straight pride celebration? Well, last month, some of those snowflakes in Idaho organized just that and called it the Hetero Awesome Fest. No, really, that's what they called it. Attended by a crowd of dozens, the event featured, unknowingly, an LGBTQ musical act that performed a song that was, well, let's say, unkind to the snowflake sensibilities of the crowd.
Very nice.
Welcome back once again to Trans Truth. I am Aunt Kelly, she, her, hers, joined as always by.
I'm Jeri Ann.
And Jeri Ann and I have been working on a lot of material of late for upcoming episodes, including this one. So, without any further ado, take it away, Jeri Ann.
All right, Kelly, I found myself recently gravitating towards videos of congressional proceedings. Try as I might, I'm just like a moth to a flame. And a few weeks ago, I watched the defense and challenges to Texas Senate Bill 10, which calls for the 10 Commandments to be prominently displayed in every classroom in the state of Texas. The bill passed and now is law. This bill was authored by Senator Phil King, and it was carried by State Representative Candy Noble. And it was Candy Noble defending the bill with questioning by, what's that guy's name? Tellerico is his last name. Anyway, it was just absolutely fascinating. But what got under my skin was her saying that the 10 Commandments was foundational to our democracy and the Constitution and the Declaration, and it was what the Founding Fathers wanted, and just all kinds of bull like that.
I'm guessing you're going to tell us that's not the case.
You think?
I know better.
I might as well have told Brer Bear not to throw me in that briar patch. So anyway, what's being promoted by right-wing conservatives is the fallacy that America is a Christian nation where the Bible is supreme and superior to the Constitution. Somehow the Constitution and beliefs of the Founding Fathers call for a Christian nation. Now, let's start with the American Revolution, not the fighting, but the initial revolt. The Founding Fathers were this group of prominent statesmen and leaders who played key roles in the American Revolution and the subsequent establishment of the United States. And what they did, they declared independence, and they did so with a document that they wrote and signed called the Declaration of Independence. So what this was a message to the King of England that they have had it up to here. Things were just not going well for the colonists, and you've heard expressions like taxation without representation and stuff like that. Anyway, these Founding Fathers in no way called for the founding of a Christian nation. And while there isn't a universal agreed upon list, the most commonly cited Founding Fathers include George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison. Now, John Jay is a guy I don't know a whole lot about. He was probably, a sleeper, just kind of a quiet guy, but obviously very influential and dedicated. But these men were not necessarily Christian. They were more exactly deist is what is a word that I have seen them referred to. They were enlightened, woke, if you will.
Woke?
Yes, they were woke liberals who wanted to rebel against religious superstitions, state-controlled religion, and religion-controlled government and theocracy. And they were opposed to the wars between the Catholics and the Protestants that took place for centuries in Great Britain. In fact, the wars between the Protestants and the Catholics extended into my lifetime. I remember as a young person, the Irish and the British at arms with each other. And what was it? The Irish Liberation Army?
The Irish Republican Army.
Yeah,
Northern Ireland. Yeah.
Right. The IRA. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you know anything about history, you've heard things like crusades, the Christian crusades, the Inquisition, witchcraft trials, all were driven by religion and didn't belong in an age of enlightenment in a land of free people. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
I need to drop this in here. As you said, the founding fathers, well, they didn't call themselves woke, but they did proudly consider themselves enlightened.
Yes.
They and the great thinkers of their time who influenced them, Thomas Paine, Voltaire, were radical, enlightened people. And not all of them, but a good many of the founding fathers were Freemasons. And the Freemasons of that era were, I guess you could say, an underpinning, a safe place for Enlightenment thought to be carried out, to have that kind of discourse. I say this because I was a Freemason. I am a Freemason, even though they would not have me in lodge today. And I made a substantial study of these men and their influence on our history. Anyway,
Okay,
carry
well,
on.
so you probably know more than I do about these guys, but let's do this. Let's let me start with each one of these guys and just say something briefly about them, and you can jump in there if you need to or want to. So these guys wanted to set up a government that radically separated church and state. So uh, let's look at some details. Thomas Jefferson. He is quoted as saying, Christianity is the most perverted system that ever shone on the man. Now, he did rewrite the Bible, but he cut out anything that was spiritual, supernatural, or a miracle in nature. Well, I'm going to come back to Thomas Jefferson and just plug in a little known fact about him later, but when we start talking about the Declaration of Independence. But any thoughts on Thomas Jefferson?
No, I'll let you. Well, not at this point. I've got another observation on the lot of them, but it will come as it comes.
Okay. James Madison was probably agnostic, but didn't he did see some moral value in organized religion. When I think about James Madison being agnostic, it reminds me that you hear the one about the dyslexic agnostic.
Nope, I don't think so.
Yeah, he pondered whether or not there really was a dog.
Okay. that one was really slow for me to pick up on, but I got it.
You can plug in some laughter later if you want to. Okay. So George Washington, he attended church except for days when they were having communion. He also did not pray. And it seemed like, isn't there a famous painting of George Washington praying before he crossed the Delaware or something? I mean, praying that boat didn't sink or something like that. It seemed like
I seem to remember that picture somewhere. I could not tell you the title of
it.
But
I actually think it's Valley Forge. But it's just a misconception. John Adams, when he was fourth president, I think. When he was president, he proclaimed a day of prayer because there were tensions with the country of France. However, when the tensions were somewhat resolved, he is quoted, actually wrote in the Treaty of Tripoli, saying, the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion.
That's right.
Yeah, 1797.
Stated it black and white.
Still there in writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to rule him out if you're calling for a Christian nation. Okay, Thomas Paine, the great philosopher and statesman, he was probably atheist, at best agnostic. He said, boy, you just brace yourself for this one. All national institutions of churches, whether Jew or Christian, appear to me to be inventions set up to terrify and enslave mankind and to monopolize power and profit. The Christian religion is a parody of the worship of the sun, where they put in a man who never existed. He was just as critical of the Bible. He said, the divinity of Christ is a belief that I cannot subscribe to.
That's some pretty heretical talking for a leader, a founder of a Christian nation.
Yeah. So Benjamin Franklin was at best an enlightened deist. He said, I have found Christian dogma not at all to my liking, but I have always thought well of the ethics of religion. I believe in the same kind of God that you do, but I do not find it necessary to belong to any particular church or follow some kind of priest to be virtuous. So
Yeah,
that's my take on the founding fathers.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah, all that is familiar, because, as I said before, I studied the founding fathers and the influence of Freemasonry on their thinking. They were children of the Enlightenment, and they were also barely a generation removed from a time when believing the wrong way or in the wrong kind of God could get you executed by the state,
Yep.
because the state and the church were at that point still intertwined. And I'm talking about just about any of the Western nations. So fundamental to Masonic thought is the notion that we should all believe in a supreme being, but not argue about what that being looks like or what they said. You just need to be humble enough to acknowledge that there are greater things and earnest enough to find commonality and remove contention without divine authority. That's what Paine and Jefferson and all those dudes believed in.
Okay, so that's it for now on the founding fathers, and I think it's safe to say that they did not call for the establishment of a Christian nation. So let's look at the documents that allegedly call for a Christian nation. First, the Declaration of Independence that started it all. It was signed, ratified on July 4th, 1776. It is the contents of this declaration that cause us to eat hot dogs and shoot firecrackers. So,
And apple pie.
anyway,
Don't forget apple pie.
yeah. So the purpose of the document, believe it or not, was just a list of complaints against the King of England. The purpose was to let King George know that the people residing in the 13 colonies had had enough of his tyranny. Most of the document is a list of the grievances against the king. The first two paragraphs do contain the words God and Creator. Let me read it to you. It's short. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Remember, the founding fathers, for the most part, did believe in a God, but they never expounded the tenets of Christianity. Liberating power called for in this document comes from the people, as in by the people, of the people, and for the people.
Absolutely right. It didn't happen yet, But these men had the idea of forming a government that drew its authority to govern from the people, not from any divine right, as in a king or dictator or emperor, but from the people.
Now, I think it's fair. Let somebody, change the channel or go to another podcast because we're offending them. Let me just clarify some things. I personally am not against someone believing whatever they want to believe, or going to church, or practicing some form of religion. I just have a problem when it affects the personal liberties of other people and the quality of life. I have a problem when religion seems to be taking over the governing of a country, and that's what this is all about. This was, what started all this was the law that demanded that the Ten Commandments be posted in every classroom in the state of Texas. So from pre-kindergarten or early childhood, really, through graduate classes, uh, we're imposing this document that actually is Jewish in nature and in history and in tradition. Also appears in the Christian Bible, but it does not apply to other religions. It doesn't apply to someone who chooses not to believe that, like some of our founding fathers. So I just want to set that straight, that we here at Trans Truth are not promoting anything against anyone's personal beliefs. We do promote human rights. So the other document that we need to talk about is the Constitution. Constitution of the United States. In fact, I've got a copy of it right here in front of me. This is my purse copy. I love it when someone says it is my constitutional right to such and such, and I pull this out and I hand it to them and say, "Show me."
Yeah.
So anyway, the Constitution came about 11 years later. A lot of people think that it was almost simultaneous, the Declaration of Independence, and we had this Constitution ready to go. But no, it took 11 years. And I think you have some thoughts on what transpired during that 11 years.
Oh, yes. There was no small amount of argument about just what shape the document that would form the foundation of our system of law and government should take. There were some of the founding fathers who were staunch believers in this or that sect of Christianity. Some were Jews, and they could not agree on whose God or whose holy book should be the authority for that document, that foundation of our system of law and government. Good enlightened men that they were, they finally figured out that, we don't need that authority. We're gonna forge ahead with the idea that our people will be allowed to govern themselves. And even after the Constitutional Convention, or during the Constitutional Convention, arguments over the wording were frequent and sometimes strenuous because this or that group knew that this particular wording wouldn't fly with their constituents. So it was a remarkable accomplishment when they finally came up with something that they felt could be sent out to the 13 original states for ratification.
Well, as a result of all the fighting and bickering, argument, and what have you, the words God and Creator do not appear anywhere in the Constitution of the United States. We talked on the phone the other day. I told you I read that whole cotton picking thing from sunrise to sunset again, and looking for those words or anything like it, and not not only it sure doesn't call for a Christian nation, doesn't say anything about Jesus the Christ. But anyway, again, like you said, it in fact calls for power coming from the people, not a religious document or from a higher power. So listen to the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Not only that, not only do you not see reference to God or Creator in the preamble, the very first amendment to the Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Wait. That sounds like the same radical, woke, liberal thing that you were just talking about.
Well, not only,
Leaving people to believe how they want.
Yep. Not only that, I just also gave a brief preview to future episodes of Trans Truth. So anyway, the Founding Fathers, the Declaration of Independence, or the Constitution do not form or call for the U.S. to be a Christian nation. And the Ten Commandments is not a foundational document for our country. That was the argument that Kathy Nobles, the representative who carried this bill, insisted on, that the Ten Commandments was foundational to a foundational document to our country, so to our democracy. So where does this thinking come from? Well, to some extent, it arrives out of ignorance and erroneous assumptions. Most people really don't know what the Declaration and the Constitution actually say. In fact, most people couldn't tell you what all 10 commandments were. But they assume that they do know. And if you remember, like I mentioned during the pandemic, conservatives would often say they do not have to wear a face mask to protect others because it was their constitutional right. Of course, there's no such thing in the Constitution. Give me a break.
A lot of that going around.
So, but historically, there were times when morality and order needed to be established for the advancement of civilization, Western expansion, new territories, towns, all needed rules and regulations. I mean, they all couldn't be Langtree, Texas. Judge Roy Bean, the law west of the Mississippi.
West of the Pecos.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, west of the Pecos.
He got it done, though, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. It reminds me of the humorous story about some men finding a corpse out in the Chihuahuan Desert and dragged the corpse into town and brought it to the judge. And the judge, they found $30 on the corpse. And so the judge fined the corpse $20 for something and charged him $10 to be buried or for a funeral. So anyway,
litter in the desert, I guess.
Yeah, something like that. Took the corpses $30, but a lot of towns had to have some kind of rules and regulations to establish order. And guess what was always handy? 10 Commandments. It's a good idea not to lie, cheat, steal, and mess around. Those things come in handy. And it's a good idea not to kill anybody. That gets you in big trouble. After the Civil War, there was a need to reestablish order and bring the country together during a time of great stress. And after that, we had world wars, World War I, World War II. the communist threat, the bomb. Religion was used to lessen threats to the American way of life. Christian nationalism got a real shot in the arm in 1954 when the phrase "one nation under God" was legally added to the Pledge of Allegiance. The original Pledge of Allegiance did not have that phrase. It simply said "one nation indivisible." And 2 years after that, the phrase "in God we trust" was put on all currency. This was all during the Cold War, a helpless time when survival was threatened by the possibility of nuclear war. People built bomb shelters, stocked with supplies. Schools practiced duck and cover drills. I remember as a kid practicing these drills, crawling under our school desks because the sirens indicated a nuclear bomb was going to fall on us, as if a school desk was going to offer any protection. But it's like the phrase "in God we trust." If you think it does, then it does. So the president at that time was Dwight Eisenhower, and his purpose was to turn fear into hope. So, I can see that. Now, back to Senator Phil King, the author of Senate Bill 10. I found this on his website. The Constitution gives the federal government well-defined powers that are very narrow in scope. The 10th Amendment was intended to prevent federal encroachment of our individual liberties and leaving much of the authority to the states. After all, the states created the federal government, not the other way around. Now, here's the clincher. I remain committed to the cause of limited government. Now, this is the guy who wrote a bill demanding that by the government that the 10 Commandments be exposed to every single student at every age in the state of Texas. But he wants to limit government. Let me continue. I remain committed to the cause of limited government, individual liberty, free enterprise, and family values.
Oh,
Now,
family values. Here we go.
There we go. The voters of Senate District 10 can rest assured that I will continue to defend and promote these vital principles as their voice in the Texas Senate. You can't make this stuff up.
Just a side observation, since we've been talking about founding fathers. One of the things that I'm paraphrasing here, attributed to Thomas Jefferson, was that the success of our nation's government demands an educated and informed electorate. Sounds like we're losing ground there, and the tyrants are picking up the slack.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that notion, that quote in an earlier
We did,
episode
yeah.
when we talked about education,
Yep.
the demise of education with vouchers and school vouchers and things like that. But another interesting fact about Thomas Jefferson: did you know that he put a paragraph in the Declaration of Independence that calls for the elimination of slavery?
No.
And he himself owned
What?
600
Yeah.
slaves.
He had him a slave concubine even.
Yeah. Now, this is kind of a preview for a future episode of Trans Truth that I'm going to put together, and it is the conflict between knowing what's right and doing what's wrong, and the motivation for that, the dynamics of that. We're going to take a look at that because that is actually what drives our government and our laws. So. Anyway, now, this is Trans Truth. So our listeners may be wondering, especially if this is your first time, what does this have to do with Trans Truth? Well, as I've stated in our last episode, it's time that we need to broaden our focus because there is an attack on basic human rights. And without human rights, there can be no trans rights. Marginalized people in this country are being denied the basic rights of due process, protection under law, civil liberties, the right for medical care, job protection, just to name a few. There is an enemy out to get us. And it is strategically important to know how the enemy thinks and what they are capable of doing.
Could not agree more. Thank you, Jeri Ann. I can't wait to see the content for the next episodes that we're working on, or that you are working on.
Yeah, let's see. The next one, well, I'm not real sure which one, but coming up, we're going to talk about the militarization of our society and the control of the media. Also, like I just mentioned, we're going to look at the conflict between knowing what's right and yet doing what's wrong. We might look at that one next.
Okay, and since we're doing previews, I've got almost ready to go an episode that looks at some chilling comparisons between what's going on in 2025 in the United States and what went on in 1930s Germany. We're thumbing our nose at Godwin's law. Let's just put it that way. All right. Any other last words, Jeri Ann?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I want to thank our listeners. And throughout the world, last I heard, we were in 9 different countries. And I understand that a lot of what we're talking about may be news or even foreign to people in other countries. But again, the world seems to follow where the United States goes or has in the past. I'm actually kind of relieved nowadays that it seems like the rest of the world, and in particular Europe, the rest of the civilized world, is kind of distancing themselves from the United States. I think that's a very healthy thing to do.
Yeah, for them.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, one more thing I wanted to start throwing out at the end of our episode, all of our episodes, is if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us at info@transtruth.info. Yeah, it's kind of a weird domain name, but the email address again is info@transtruth.info. As always, we have an open invitation to anyone who wants to have words with us on the podcast. You have been listening to Trans Truth, the podcast that speaks the truth about what it means to be transgender. We hope that you have found this episode to be informative and enlightening, whether you are transgender yourself, if you have a friend or loved one who is transgender, and especially if you are simply looking to understand more about the transgender experience. Copyright 2025, Trans Truth.